right. Thank you so much, Tara. Hello, everybody. Happy Thursday. I hope everyone is doing well. My name is Lhey Ralston. I am also known as Mommy Lhey on the internet. It is a pleasure to be here to demonstrate and teach you one of my most favorite style of illustration. And of course, I'd like to thank Faber-Castell and Plaza Art for inviting me over. But this class will not be it's not going to be successful without all of you. So thank you for taking some time out of your busy day. I know that my kids are back to school. I don't know if your kids are back to school. Some kids not yet, but they start here early in Texas. So, but thank you again. First of all, I'd like to give you a little bit of information about me. I am a self-taught illustrator. So I know that some of you maybe here have been practicing a lot, but maybe some of you just started, dabbling into art. I am a professional singer. I've been performing since I was young. And after I had my last child, that's when I realized I needed a new hobby. And I wanted to try art, but I've never been talented. I was not given the gift of art, but I'm here to say that art is it's a skill. So if you are someone like me that say, I can't do that. I can't do that. I'm not into art. I can't do it. Let me tell you, you can practice. So with practice and really if you put your heart into anything, in this life, whether it's art, whether it's music, whether it's work, if you put your heart into it, I think you got this. So self-taught illustrator, I've been working with Faber-Castell for almost 2 years now, and I just love their products. I love kawaii style. I'm into hand lettering. And lately I have discovered this style of illustration, which is kind of like a children's book illustration. So we're going to talk a little bit about some techniques, what are my favorite techniques, products. And like what Tara said, if you don't have the products that I'll be using today, it's okay if you have something similar that will work. It's perfect, So first of all, I'd like to start with talking about the supplies that I'll be using. And if you have any questions anytime during this class, I will look into the chat section as well, so I won't miss it. But Miss Tara is here, and she'll help me moderate some of the questions. I would love it if you would create along with me today. I promise you this is simple. You're going to leave the class feeling like, wow, I can do this. And again, before we start, I also want you to be kind to yourself and allow yourself to really have fun. Because what is the reason why we're doing this art? Is because we want to enjoy ourselves. We want to learn. We want to do something relaxing. So if you do the opposite, which is get frustrated, overwhelmed, then we beat the purpose of, the enjoyment of creating. So be kind to yourself, give yourself grace, and let's just have lots of fun. All right. Okay. So I'm going to go switch over to the overhead, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the supplies that I'm going to use. I have some brushes from Princeton over here. And if you have your sample kit, you would receive the number 10 long round brush. I own quite a few of the Velvet Touch from Princeton because I just love them. I use it for acrylic watercolor mostly, but then if I'm using some gouache and all that, I use these as well. I have the smallest one, the 5 out of 0, the spotter. I have the round in 2, and then the flat, the chisel blender in 6. And I know I do have a much bigger one. My favorite brush to use would be a round brush because it's just so versatile. I just love it. And then pencil, of course, this is going to be your best friend. I love a pencil and some eraser because, like everything in life, I make quite a few mistakes, maybe a lot. But so pencil and eraser are my best friend. And then we're going to be using I wanted to show you just real quick. You can also use some water brush pens. So if you have any water brush that you have in there, you may use that. The only problem with water brush is that depending, of course, on the brand, sometimes it's a little bit hard to control the water. So, it's just something that you might think about. I have some paper towel. My solution to a water brush pen is just put in a little bit of water. And when I feel like, every time I feel like it's pushing a lot of water out, I just always have to dab it in the paper towel, baby wipes, that's something that I have beside me. This one is from Faber-Castell. I love this one too. It's kind of like a mechanism is pistol, I think is what they call it. So basically you just kind of like pull the water in and then you should have it out. And then you have that water. But that round brush from Princeton is amazing too. And then for pencil, I'd like to always share this because I personally love using mechanical pencil. Now, you don't have to use a mechanical pencil. This is just a personal preference. And a lot of the products that I'll be using today are personal preference. And I really love to share why I love these certain products. It doesn't have to be the brand, but just the products, why it's helpful to my process. And I talk about that while we do the class. So mechanical pencil is something I really love because I feel like I have better control. And also this particular one right here is much thicker. So it's a grip plus. I can hold it when I do a lot of work. After a while, my hands tend to get crampy, so when I do this a lot and I get tired. So this one helps. What else? Now we're working with some water today. So it is very important to use a mixed media pad or a watercolor paper because this is the type of paper that will really handle your water beautifully. This one is from Strathmore. This is their mixed media paper and I love it. I use it all the time. And of course, when you're working with water, you need a pen that will be waterproof or archival. And these ones I have here are from Faber-Castell, the Pitt Artist pens. The black, especially the black, comes in many different types of tips. They have the extra super fine, they have the super fine, the fine, the medium. They have the brush, which I will be using today. They have a calligraphy soft brush. They have a soft chisel, so much. I mean, it depends on what you're looking for. But lately, they have this brand new Fudenoske pens. Some of you may be familiar with this. I'd love to see in the chat if you guys have ever tried a Fudenoske marker before. It doesn't have to be from this brand, but any type of Fudenoske. I'd like to share this every time I talk about the Fudenoske. Fude means brush pen in Japanese. And according to Google, Fudenoske means a brush pen that helps. And with my type of drawing, my techniques, I really love using any type of brush because it depends on the amount of pressure that you use when you're using these type of brush pens, just like the Pitt Artist pens and brush. Brush pens are great, amazing tool. They really are, but they can be a little tricky because sometimes it's difficult to handle them. It's all about the pressure that you apply when you're using your brush pen. So this is what I'll be working with when doing the line art. So I might grab the Fudenoske hard and then the Fudenoske medium. And then for a much thicker strokes, I'll be using the Pitt Artist pen in brush. All right. And then we're going to be using the Faber-Castell, the Albrecht Durer watercolor markers. These are watercolor pigments in a marker form. I just love these things because I get better control when I am applying my colors and my pigments. You will see me using an artist palette as well. It doesn't have to be anything expensive. I forgot where I got it, but I love using the artist palette because you can mix in your colors because these are pure pigments in here. You can create your own colors. If you want a green, but much deeper, then you can just pick up a darker shade, maybe the dark sepia, and then mix your own green. So it's nice to have that option. And then I'll be using some Polychromos pencils. Now, again, everything that I'm doing here are very personal preference, but since this is going to be perfect for that children's book illustration, because if you look at books, I love children's books. I love looking at the illustrations, beautiful ones. You see a lot of textures in there, but then of course that depends also on the artist. Maybe they just use watercolor. Some are just done digitally most of the time, but they mimic that look of the traditional art, that watercolor first, then textured by using the Polychromos. Now, there are many different techniques and products that you can use to create textures. You can use the gelatos. I love using the gelatos for my base, and then use some pencils on top of it, so many different things. But what we're going to learn today are different types of techniques, like in watercolor. And before we proceed to the real illustration, to the project that we're going to create today, I'd like to talk about that real quick. So when we're dealing with watercolors, we really have three different techniques that I love to do, which is, the first one would be dry on dry. Let's pick a deeper color so that we can see it here. And I'm going to pull up my chat so I can see the chat. Okay, there we go. All right, Fudenosuke. It says Fude, Fude, and then Nosuke. I used to pronounce it as Fudenosuke. They said that that's okay to pronounce it as that, the Fudenosuke. But they said that when you say Fudenosuke, it's like with excitement. So when you want to say it just calmly, it's Fudenosuke. So there you go. I hope that's a trivia for today. All right, so first technique that I'll be using a lot would be the dry on dry, which is applying my marker directly into my watercolor paper like that. And then I'm going to grab my brush pen. I forgot to mention that I have a bowl of water in here too. And then do my blending by applying the water. And let me zoom in just real quick. It's not being nice to my, like this, we blend it. And I'm going to switch over to manual focus so that it will not give us a hard time today. There we go. There. This one, where we do the blending. The reason why I love the markers, these markers particularly, is that I can apply the marker and I don't have to blend it right away. Some markers would leave stain into the paper, and this one personally doesn't, so I love it. Now, the second technique that we'll be doing would be, because I want to show you before we actually start the drawing so that when you hear me talk about all these things, you actually know what I'm doing. So this one will be wet on wet. So I'm just wetting my paper like that. And this is where that artist palette will help, because I would often just do this, apply it there, and then pick up the colors like that, and then drop it. But look at that. Look how beautiful that blends. I love it, especially when the marker, the colors, the pigment starts moving around with that water. It follows the movement of the water, and it's so fun. And then we can adjust the opacity by just adding more pigments to it. I don't know why this, there you go. Just like that. So this is something that I'll be using a lot, doing a lot. And then when I say, this one would be wet on dry, because this is a wet, oops, and then the paper is dry. All right, so wet on dry, wet on wet, and then dry on dry. So that's what we're going to be doing. I'm going to look at the chat real quick. There you go. Naomi is asking about the gelatos. We should do a class about the gelatos, because lately it really has been my favorite medium to use. I'm going to pull out some of the gelatos because I love using the gelatos for highlights, but I love to use that for coloring too. Gelatos are really, it's like the mechanism of the lipstick, as you can see here. I'll just pull it up. It looks like a lipstick, but don't eat it. It's not, gelatos are not, nothing you can eat. And I'm gonna grab this one too. They're so versatile that you can use it many different ways. You can apply it directly on your page and use your finger to just smudge like this, right? You can also use the palette like this, kind of like with the Albrecht Durer. Pick up some water and then use it like that. So many different ways you can use that. We should do a class about the gelatos as well. Okay, so now I'm going to get some clean paper in here. And we're going to start the fun part. Here we go. Grab my pencil, zoom out just a little bit so we can see the whole area right there. All right, here we go. So when you were talking about children book illustration, I'd like to pull out just a sample of what I mean. So here are some projects that I've been working on recently. I love to sketch. I sketch out like this. I have many different types of sketches in here. I like to plan out my ideas first. For example, how do you want your story to be told? Most importantly, you have to think about your foreground, your background. You know, your foreground has to be much wider. Look at it in a point of view of a camera. So this is me, and that would be my background. Look how just smaller everything kind of appears because I am here in the foreground. So when you're telling a story like that, it is important to plan that as well. So what is your main subject? Do you want your main subject to be in the background, and something in the foreground is kind of like maybe some big plants or things like that? And then, so it doesn't have to be, your subject doesn't have to be in the foreground all the time. You can also choose to put them in the background and have something up in front that's much bigger. So that's kind of like being in a story. I love doing some thumbnails as well. I'm not sure if I can pull it up here, but I'd like to show you. This is just a sketchbook, but I love using thumbnail, like a smaller drawing where I'm planning all these ideas. All right. So, but as you can see here, so my subject is here and I have a background of a small house and she's walking away. So it's very easy. It's like a little kid drawing, but I think it's important to understand just the basics as well. I mean, art is subjective. You can do it however you want it, and no one's going to stop you and say, hey, that's wrong and this is right. I think if you go to school, I mean, there's like proper and technical correct way to do things, but you know, as long as you feel like this speaks to you, I say keep working and keep doing that. So here's a perfect example also. I have my little critters in here. I have a little frog, this like bug over here, and then I have trees in the background. That's a perfect example as well. This one is great too. We have my little tiny mouse and that flower. So that's something I want you to plan that in your head before you start proceeding with your final project. If you can create, you know, a thumbnail, that would be actually much better. And I prefer that. This one is great too. Not a whole lot of background in here, just the sky, you know, but my subject is right in the middle and you can really see it. And then we have just small little things in here like flowers and some leaves to kind of serve as your part of the story. So when you look at this, you look at the butterfly and say, oh, the butterfly is having fun, you know, a very nice day out like this, and this one as well. There's not a whole lot of background going on. You just have the bee and the flower, and you have a few clouds in the back. You can make the clouds much smaller, but again, it just really depends on how you would like things. All right. Another example of that, and you can see here, I think I'm going to go focus on this one. This is where you're going to see a lot of that texture that I'm talking about. I have some watercolors and I use colored pencils on top of the watercolor to create some of those beautiful textures. Um, and it's just, again, personal preference. You might want to just keep with the watercolor and say, you know what, I just love that look. Then by all means, you don't have to do the colored pencils on top. All right. Here we go. Nancy is asking, how do you decide the size of the art for children's book? Are there any standard sizes? Every time I would create something, it just depends on the client, really, what size do they want the book? They might ask you for a 9 by 12. And also, it's going to depend on the quality. So, most of the time, everything, even if it's done traditionally, it will be transferred. Everything is done traditionally, it will still be transferred as digital. So they can resize it. So I think if you have it in a much bigger size so that when you scan it, you can get a much higher quality. I think it's always better that way, unless you're just doing it directly digital, then, that's another story for that. Here we go. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep things simple because we have a limited time and I don't want to keep you here forever. And I admit that I am slow. I really do take my time when I'm creating. What we have in the sample, in the photo, is that we have our tree, we have an owl inside the tree, we have a little raccoon animal on the side. Now we can create that today. But I would like to ask you, do you have you want it to keep things simple so we can really talk about starting from the basic, not a whole lot of background, make sure that our subject is really the center of the story. And also, I would love if you're going to create along with us because I would love to see your drawings in a little bit. So let's see, my story would be about. And this is where I'm really bad because as I go along, it really is all about that gut feeling of what am I feeling today? What is the story do I want to tell today? It could be just little creatures like maybe just fireflies, butterflies, or just light bugs, frogs, things like that. But it doesn't have to be like that. You can create a fairy, you can create a gnome, you can create just a scene without any characters in there. So, what are we feeling today? I think we're going to create a day scene. Let's do that. Maybe a sunset scene. But I'm planning this where my subject is going to be in the middle of our paper. This one is, I would like to say, a 6 by 9 size. Is that right, Tara? The sample that we have? I'm not quite sure. Could be wrong. Maybe an A5 size.
I believe, yeah, these are the cut sheets. I believe, yes, they are 6 by 9.
A 6 by 9. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to have our subject in the center of our drawing, and we're going to create that big tree in the middle. Now, this is the Grip Plus. I think this is what Claudia is asking. Is that right?
Okay. I made a mistake and said that you were using a Sumo Grip. So the Sumo Grip pencils, sorry, Beth, are very similar to the Faber one that Lhey is using. So I put that link in the chat because we don't carry the Faber ones, unfortunately.
So that would be, as long as you're having like a much thicker, wider here, I just personally love it. Now for the tree, this is what I want you to do. I don't want you to overcomplicate your drawing. The simpler it is, the more whimsical it becomes. I promise you that. So you don't want to overcomplicate things. You have the base of her tree. We're going to create some branches on top. And so that's what we're going to do. I know mentally that this is my subject. This is where it is. We're going to create some few in the foreground, little tiny leaves over here, some plants. So I'm going to start with just adding a cross in the middle, just so I can see where that middle part is. You might not be seeing this because the camera might not be picking up the cross, but I have a cross in there. And what I'm going to do is I am just going to draw my tree. I am not going to go like this, like that. So we have the base first, and this is where I'm going to start adding the branches on top. And always remember that when you're sketching, try to be as light as possible so that it will be easier to erase things later. So if you're going to notice that my lines are wiggly, I try not to make super, let me see this, if you guys can see that. Here. We're already building textures, even here in the very beginning of our drawing, because it's not straight. Everything's already looking whimsical by adding some jiggly lines. Look at me, the way I'm holding my pencil is slightly angled as well. I'm not doing this. I have my control, the base of my hand is here, comfortably laying. See? And this is where the movement is coming. And so the way I hold my pencil is slightly 45-degree angle from my paper. And the way I would move things is just like this. And I'm intentionally making it slightly jiggly, like that. And we just have simple shapes, kind of like a letter V going down here, and then I'm bringing it up again. And we're just going to keep adding some small branches. I'm using just the tip of my pencil. Bringing it down. Just don't overthink this one, because you can easily overthink just adding simple branches, because I am guilty of that. Bring this up. All right, I'm done. That's it. All right, and we can do some changes later. This is just our basic first. Now, looking at my tree, I know that a part of my tree would be cut off, right? Because if you're going to look at that, part of it is going to be there. So we could choose to bring everything down or leave it the way just as it is. It's going to be perfect. Now, to create our tree, we're just going to create half circle shapes. I'm going to make a full one, just like this. Like that. Just like that. And then in the middle, I'm going to create an oval shape. Maybe that's too big. Yep, definitely a little too big. So this is where we're going to put our little tiny critter owl in there. All right. Here we go. And then over here, I'm going to create some plants. Oops, you guys can see that. Notice how I'm using just very basic, simple strokes. Everything is just like half circle, an oval, wiggly lines, jagged lines, right? Half circles. From my tree, I'm going to stretch it to the sides like this. And we're going to create like the roots for the base. And notice how it's just like drawing a wave. So up, down, down. And I'm going to change my direction. I'm coming in from the right side this time. I'll repeat the same process, and just like that. Now I feel like I have to create something here in the middle part because it just looks so empty, but we're going to come back to that later. We're going to finish up here by adding, not finish, no, we're just getting started. We're going to add our little tiny owl. Now we're going to draw the body first. And for the body, it's kind of like having a half oval, right? So I'm just coming in from this side, the bottom part of my tree, and just going to create like a half oval shape. Don't make it too pointy on top, just slightly rounded, kind of like the minion shape. I don't know any other way. There could be some technical term to it, but half oval like that. Zoom it in so you can see it more. All right. We're going to create two eyes, two oval this time. Notice how my eyes are like slanted slightly. The left one is slanted. This one also on the right is slightly slanted like that. All right. And then we're going to create the eye inside. We're just starting on this side, both sides like this. And then we're going to fill that shape in. So you can see if it's equal and balanced. And then you can just adjust as you go along. Okay. Feel like this one is much smaller than my right, so I'm just going to keep adding some width to my stroke. Just like that. And then for the nose, we're going to start with just one straight line, slightly curved, not straight, I'm sorry, some slight curved line like this. And the bottom of it will be kind of like a letter U. We're just going to close that part in. Right. And then we're going to add some ears. Again, I try not to make too much of a pointy line because I feel like when it's slightly curved, slightly rounded, I feel like it appears softer than when you have too much of pointy lines. But I mean, again, that's just my personal preference. You might prefer that pointy line. So notice that my ear is just slightly rounded. It's not completely sharp on top. Just that. And then we're going to add the wings, and I'm going to create some scalloped. It's kind of like a waterfall. It's going down 1, 2, 3, like this. And then I'll just repeat that on the other side, going down. So 1, 2, 3. Right. And then later we're going to fill this part right here, but you can shade it so you can see it, because sometimes it mentally helps me when I know what I'm going to do later on. So you can add the shading already, just like that. I'm going to back up real quick. There we go. And then I'm going to add my little raccoon here. You can make yours into another animal if you'd like. We can create a bunny, so it's different. You know, those are those enchanted forest creatures. Now, if you would like, because since we're sketching, I know it sometimes helps to kind of like draw the whole face. But I want you to really pay attention to how I use my shapes in here, because it's going to be very simple. Sometimes when you look at things and as an adult, we try to overcomplicate things when really in reality, everything is just simple shape. It's like being in kindergarten again, because we're going to draw basic oval, basic circle, so that's what we're going to do. For the face, if you'd like, you can create the whole face, knowing that it's hiding behind the tree. We can just erase part of that face later, right? But it's just a basic oval like that. We can choose to create a bunny today because I love bunnies. I'm going to start with the hand first. So everything is hidden behind except for that one arm. So I always like to start. I'm going to teach you where I find it most comfortable. I'm going to start drawing the dress first. And the way you would do kawaii style or whimsical types of illustration is that think of it as your head is slightly bigger than the rest of the body. It just appears cuter that way. It feels more cartoonish when your head is much bigger than the rest of your body, but it doesn't always work that way. Some type of drawings and illustration, you really need to have the balance, the symmetry. But with my style of drawing, I find it that when I have my bigger, just slightly larger than the rest of the body, it works out. It appears to be much cuter. Okay, so that's my head, and I'm going to start with a dress. I'm going to make things. Dress would be just flowing, so very narrow on top, and this one would flow. So right in the middle, find the middle of your head, and just in the center of that, that's where our dress is going to be. So I'm just going to bring this one line down like that. And then again, some scallops here or some half circles like that. And we're going to draw the arm. This is where I think my struggle when I was big, first starting out to draw is that anatomy, body, whether it's an animal, whether it's, a person, it really is very hard. And I struggled with it too much. I think everything has to be in small. Think small when you're drawing. Everything that I was doing before is just slightly larger, slightly on the wider side. So when I say just a tad bit from the dress where we started the dress, you're really going to think small. Don't make it too arm wide. So like this, and I'm going to show you so you can see. If you make your arm, look, it already looks very different. So we're going to think small. So from the dress, here's her dress, and here's the head. This. Notice the distance from that dress. It's very, very tiny. And I'm bringing this down like that. Fill it in like that. Now you might want to, I personally love to erase as I'm going along because it really does help me with my visual. So I know that this part of the head is hidden, and I know that this one is going to appear in there. So I like to clean up. There we go. And then we can add the bunny ears. Now you can choose to have the bunny ears just straight like this. Just like that. You can also create it where it's still fluffy. So notice my motion right here going up, and then bring this down and go into a curve, just like that. And you're going to leave a space zoomed in like that. And then from here, I'm going to bring this one down and connect it to the top of the head of the bunny. So maybe one of your ear would be floppy and the other one would just go straight up. And I think that's okay. I think that'll be cute actually. So let's try that. So again, this is the tree. Part of its ear is hiding behind it. So we're just going to close that in. All right. Now for the eyes, everything is cuter when it's much smaller. And I like to keep things very simple. You can choose to just have 2 dots. Look how tiny the dots is. I mean, it's just like that. And then a small, tiny oval in the middle. But it is so effective. It's so simple, but so effective when you're drawing like that. You can put a straight line in the middle, just like this, and keep it that way. Now for the dress, I accidentally erased part of my dress. So I'm just going to bring it down, and then we're going to create for the neckline. That's it. And for a tiny feet, look at this. This is part where of my scallop is. I'm just going to bring one slanted line down, and I'm going to create a half oval for the feet. So part of her body is hiding. Now here is where you can accessorize. Maybe you want to put a bow in your bunny. You can definitely do that. I think that will be cute. Let's go back so we can now see it. Now we have this whole thing in here. Now for the textures of your tree, you can create it now, or you can choose to do that later with the colored pencil. But the way I'd like to texturize my tree, you don't want to keep it super busy. I like to just make things very simple to add those wood grains. So just kind of like slanted lines going up. So notice how I'm just slant. So you can add lines in here, slanted. Here you can create just like a stretch U, and then another one inside, and then another one in there. And again, you can start from the top. Now, when you're doing any types of art, I think it is important to understand what is most comfortable to you, because I noticed that with some people it's more comfortable for them to start from the top to the bottom. Some prefer to have their stroke to begin from the bottom to the top, so just find whichever is most comfortable. And then I say keep doing that. And so I'm just going to add lines in here, so just like that. Nothing special. I mean, I don't really overthink that. I just keep adding like lines inside my tree, just like that. And the same thing goes with your full tree. You can add like 3 scallops like this, like 3 humps like that. And notice how my lines are just very imperfect. I mean, it is super imperfect. It's nothing special. Look, just 3 small hump like that, just to add texture. Some are 2, some are 3. Like that. Okay. Now I'm going to create the same thing with the plant that we created at the bottom. For that foreground, we're going to do something in the background as well. I apologize. I hope you're not getting dizzy with this. All right. So we're going to create a background as well. This time, we're going to make the plant, the humps or the half circles, much smaller. We want it to appear like it's in the background, and it's much smaller than the rest of everything that's in the foreground. So we're going to create smaller humps. And this will give us the appearance that it is farther away, like that. And play around with the size of your letter C or curved line. Some are smaller, some are much bigger, and some are wider, some are like more narrow, like this. And then we're going to create another layer over here. This time, play around with the texture instead of just always the round. We want to create with some diagonal lines like this. So kind of like a letter or a triangle. This, I try not to make it too sharp, but it's hard. But everything is much smaller, so make it things smaller. Bring it up, bring it down again. Some are shorter. Some are facing towards your left, some are facing towards the right, and maybe some are just sticking straight right up. Just like that. And then remember, you're not married to one idea. You can always change things up later when we do the line art in here. Now, I want to create, because I covered the rest of the sky, I want to create some illumination in here. So I want to draw a bug, and then it's going to be here. So I want to draw just the whole shape or this whole size. I want to visualize it. All right. See if I want it there or on the left side. Here. I think that's good. And so I'm just going to erase that part. So that's me pre-planning the size. And so for the head, remember how we did that with the bunny, and that's how we're going to do that as well. So we're going to create an oval. Notice how I'm doing short strokes when I'm trying to complete a full shape. If you're having a hard time to do the full shape, try to do short strokes and then until you close that shape in. And then I'll repeat that much bigger this time for the body. This is a big lighting bug. And then we're going to do the same shape, but much smaller this time. We can make adjustments later as long as we have that full. And then we're going to create the wings. One is facing, tilting towards the left, and the other one would tilt to the right. It's kind of like a teardrop shape too, because things will get narrow when you reach the body, everything like that. And then just to plan it, I'll put that antenna because why not? It's much cuter. Now you can add some textures in the body. You want to add some lines. My lines are like curving. I'm following that shape, but also everything is kind of like curving to the right side. That curving also shows the movement of that character. It's kind of like it's giving your audience that visual of the movement of the character going towards the left side. And then I'm going to draw a smiley face just like that. Not overly complicated, simple like that. And then here, I want this to glow later. So I'm going to add this 3 lines. It's that visual that, hey, this is going to have light in here later. So things will get brighter around it and all that. So since I cannot put my lamp in here, maybe we'll just add another lighting bug, or we can create that line over here. So notice how I did this. I'm going to zoom in real quick. because we're going to create a rope. It's tied down. This one will be appear in front of the branch. The rest of the rope will be behind this branch. So we're not going to put a line in there. We'll just bring this one down. So like that. And then for that lamp, we'll just create a lamp, a straight line like this. Diagonal lines. This should be much smaller because this one is in the background. So we're going to just fix things, make my first line much smaller, like this one. So you have two diagonal lines parallel to one another. We're going to close this part right in here. Stretch this one down. This, and then close it in again with another straight line. I will create a candle in here. Like that. And then I'll add these rays to kind of show that this is illuminated. So that's part of that story right there. Are we ready to color this drawing? Everything looks so cute. I feel like I want to add just some creatures in here, maybe add some mushrooms. I think it's important to add those so we can have more things going on in this page. So we can create some mushrooms. Mushrooms, very simple. We can actually create it here. And so remember what I said about not being married to one idea? We can create some mushrooms in here in the foreground. So I'm just going to create, look, like this, like a letter C upside down. We're going to close it in with a line. And we're going to create the base of our mushroom. Things are going to be narrow on the top, and then it gets wider as we go down, like that. And then at the bottom, I'm going to close this part right here, drawing some curved lines, stop in the middle. Do the same, the opposite from that middle of the base, and then bring it closer on top. You can create another mushroom, much smaller if you'd like, over here. Doing the same thing we did, narrow on top, going wider as you go to the base of your mushroom, like that. In the middle. Now, for the lines of the mushroom, I always like to start in the middle part right here. So let me zoom that in real quick. So from here, I go do curved lines like that. See? Always starting from the middle part. And I'll stop right there. And I continue that on top. Do the same. Just like that. Just like that. Now you can choose to be creative with your mushroom to decorate it. You can just choose to have really those small dots. It doesn't have to be. Remember, you're creating your own story. If you wanted stripes, by all means, create a stripe inside your mushroom. No one is going to stop you. I know I'm not going to. If you want to put hearts inside that, please, you can choose to do so as well. Now we can just create some like grass like that on the side. Here we go. And now looking at this one, it doesn't feel like having the plants in here and that mushroom over there. I feel like I want to make it balanced by adding more mushroom on the left side of my illustration. So I'm going to recreate this to the left side, but I'm going to try not to copy it exactly because you want it to look like it is a real story where it's not just having the same mushrooms on the left side as well. But I also want it to be cohesive at the same time, so I want to have the mushroom, but maybe my mushroom this time would be much narrower. So here, much smaller mushrooms. So we have those. Then maybe we'll have different sizes of them. Bigger, maybe we'll have a big one. Maybe I'm going to create, so I'll start with my mushroom head first. This one is leaning more on the left side. Like that. I'll bring this one down. Oop. This one down. I want to create like a big rock. Just like that. We can choose to add another critter in there. Again, by just adding some simple shapes. So I am going to add a little tiny frog. Very simple frog. Remember how we created the owl? That's exactly how we're going to make it. So kind of like this half oval, like this. Just like that. And I'm going to erase part of my mushroom because I'm going to draw 2 eyes like that. Oops. I'm running out of this one. So just 2 eyes on top. And then we're going to add the legs sticking out just like this. See, notice how it's just everything is just basic, simple shapes. Just like that on the other side. Just like that. And we'll draw 2 dots inside those circles. And then we'll create a smiley face. And then I'll finish in my mushroom in there. And I'll add the same grass looking there. We can add some textures in here later when we're coloring in. Right. So I'm adding some shapes inside my mushroom just for the texture. But I think I'm really happy with this one. Now I can just add small grass like that. Now, what you want to try and avoid is creating a grounding line because sometimes it makes it more complicated, your whole illustration, by creating the grounding line. And the grounding line is just that simple line. If I add a line in here, we'll just make things complicated. So I try not to do a whole lot of that. So I just leave it to my audience, how they want to look at this illustration, this drawing. And then in here as well, you can create like small, tiny grass. So if they want to see this as a whole wall of plants, then they can, or if they want to see it where this is in the really back, that's in the background. So just leave a little bit of imagination to your audience as well. I think it's super important like that. All right, now, so this time we're done with the whole sketch. I am going to erase everything. I know what you're probably thinking. No, I know it's kind of like counter productive with everything that we did. But I think this is where I'm using the kneadable eraser, because our kneadable eraser is just going to give us that perfect silhouette, perfect guide without erasing.
That's too fast. Just try. No, I'll just do it later.
Here we go.
I have to figure out what all this stuff is too.
So I'm just going to roll this like that. There. And then it's kind of like a little putty also. My daughter loves slime. Oh my goodness. We have so many different slimes. And so this reminds me of that. So I'm just rolling. So you might have a hard time seeing this now. Now you can choose to do the line art right away. We can choose to do that because the Pit Artist pens, they are waterproof once they're dry. If you have some heat tool, I love using heat tool because it really just helps a lot with the waiting time. Sometimes I don't have a lot of time to waste. I'm just waiting for things to dry. So that's really helpful. Okay, I am going to use the Faber-Castell medium, and I'm going to show you real quick why I love these, even the brush pens. Again, like what I said, the brush pen is going to give you a really different type of lines, you know, like the comics, they have the thin and the thick, and that's what I love. And so if you use the tip of the brush pen, you're going to get a very thin, very fine point strokes. Notice how I'm using my pencil. I don't write this way. The only time you're going to see me write this way is if I am writing and not drawing. So, but every single time I would draw and illustrate or do my hand lettering, I always have a 45-degree angle from the paper. And so to create some thick strokes, you're going to apply some pressure. And I'm going to do a little bit of close up in here. So you're going to apply some pressure. Look how the tip is bended. This is where you're going to know. There. So you're creating a really thick line because I'm applying some pressure and I'm also using the body of the pen. Now the Faber-Castell looks really different from the brush pen, but they will perform the same way. It's going to depend on how much pressure you're going to apply when using these markers. Now I'm going to use the Faber-Castell medium. I can create a really fine line like this, but I can also create some thicker by adjusting the position of my marker and also applying some pressure, just like that. So when I'm doing my lines, use the tip, apply pressure, thin, thick. So thin would be light pressure, thicker strokes, apply pressure, and then thin again. And so I really love this style. The thing with a brush pen, you're going to create much thicker strokes depending on how much pressure you apply. It can be a little tricky. I feel like I get better control using the Faber-Castell because I feel like the tip of this one is much easier to handle and to control, but I love both of them and I use them all the time. It just depends on the type of illustration that I'm drawing. All right, so now I am going to start my line art, and I always like to start from the top to the bottom, just to avoid any smudges and anything like that. So here we're going to start. I'm going to start with my branches. And so again, look at the lines. Now this one, you're going to see it real well, where everything's just kind of like jaggedy lines, wiggly, and all that. It adds up to that texture that you want, that makes your drawing appear to be much more whimsical. Like that. Remember that you can still make adjustments even when you're doing your line art already. So if you step back and you look at your whole picture, your whole drawing, and you say, you know what, I feel like I need to adjust the width of this one, then, you know, please feel free to do those final adjustments while you're doing your line art.
Hey, Lhey.
Yes, ma'am.
How's it going? You're doing, I mean, this is so fun. Diane has a question. Do you want me to read it to
Yes,
you?
ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, please.
I have lead all over my drawings from the lead pencil and from my hand dragging over the drawing. How do you prevent it from looking muddy?
So I'm sorry, say that again. Have lead all over the drawing. Oh
The
no.
pencil lead is what I'm getting.
Yeah, I know. You know
yeah.
what? I do this all the time as well. You can just try and clean up after the line art. So if you allow your line art to dry, just and then before we do the final drawings, that we can make those simple adjustments. But right now, I think cleaning up is just the way to go. To avoid it, I think just pre-planning everything. You know, I am such a go as a just create as I go along. I try not to overthink too much, but I agree. I smear a lot too because of my way of drawing. I kind of like go all over the place. Sometimes I do the subject, I do the character, then I go down. But if you want to pre-plan everything and just start from the top of your drawings as you go down and create your foreground, that might be helpful as well. And also having like a piece of paper, sometimes that helps. I see a lot of different artists does that as well. They have this piece of paper, maybe a paper towel, to kind of like do this like this. So to avoid those smudges, that will help. So I mean, it's worth a try. I know I have the same issue, and it's so frustrating when you do all these beautiful drawings and then everything's kind of like smeared. So a good eraser does help and does wonders too. So sorry. All right. I am going to create the arm of this bunny. We got to name our bunny, guys. You have to think of the name. We got to go create a cute name. And also, if you're going to use the brush pen of of the pit artist, it might take, because you're going to use more ink, so you might take a bit more time, drying time for that. That's another big point for the Fudino scale. I love it. There you go. Victoria said that she uses a small piece of tracing paper. Yeah, exactly. So a vellum paper or tracing paper will really help too. And I don't know if it's just me, but every single time I would do a line art, I always mess things up. I feel like, okay, I got this. And I make like wrong strokes and look at my owl. Please tell me that it's just not me. I will love you forever. Thank you. No, I ruined it. Good thing that our drawing is so whimsical that those imperfections add charm to the drawing, or I'd like to convince myself that. Now I will not have any space for my nose. And that's why the good thing is that we have different tips. So if you have the same problem as me, I say for the smaller, finer details, use a much smaller tip of line art marker. But I like to pretend that I got this, and it doesn't always work out for me. Here we go. All right. Now I'm going to build the textures inside by doing the wood grain. See some jaggedy, wiggly lines. I remember when I was first starting with the whimsical type of illustration, I was so careful and was just overly making myself stress by overthinking things. And the more I did it, the more I was practicing and doing many different types of drawings, I realized that a lot of the imperfection is really does add some charm to the drawing. I mean, I'm not trying to say that do it intentionally and mess up, but with all honesty, I think it really does, look at this imperfect lines. Because if I'm doing another type of illustration like the kawaii art, everything is much more cleaner. The line art is much cleaner. But with the whimsical type, I feel like it really does add charm to it. All right. Here, I'm really adding some pressure to create a much thicker stroke. Like that. That. Right. Notice here, instead of a straight line, I curved it. And this is where those little tiny adjustments. And I'm going to make my candle just slightly shorter. Just like that. There we go. See, I did that again. I think this is where I'm having a hard time with creating a full shape like this. So I try not to overwhelm myself with that. So I try to kind of like do short strokes. But when I'm doing classes like this, I feel like I'm always in a hurry because I always want to finish the whole class. And so it's not being nice to me. And here. Now you can add also, I forgot to mention that we can add some textures to the wings to make it look more whimsical. I think I'm going to do this. I'm going to follow the shape, but I'm going to scoop this right in and then create that spiral, right? So I started from the bottom, following that shape of the wings, and then kind of create spirals inside the wings. Just adds more magic in there. I'm going to take my time here with the head of the bunny. I try not to mess it up too much. Down. Just like that. This. We're adding just that little tiny grass in the ground. We'll do our mushroom. Even the oval inside, I'm doing it like kind of like intentionally wiggly lines and not clean lines. So some people think that you can just build textures when you're doing your final coloring, but honestly, textures can begin from the sketches, and then intentionally pre-planning your lines like this. So instead of like clean lines by doing that jiggly lines, you're already adding textures to your illustration. I'm going to start with a frog. Just like that. This, and then I'll add my big rock.
Lhey, could you scoot the paper up?
Oh, I'm so
People are having
sorry.
a hard
Here we
time. No,
go.
that's
Thank
okay.
you.
Oh no,
Perfect. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Sometimes I get so lost when I'm like doing the drawing. I'm like, oh, I'm not in this. I'm not on frame. Sorry. All right. Oh, look at this. I think I'm super happy with that. Now I'm trying to decide if I'm going to draw the rays in black. I think final answer would be, I think I'm going to do it in black. So this is just kind of like drawing your sun. When you're drawing the sun, create those rays in there. And I'll do the same. My little light bug. All right. Now I'm gonna try my hardest to not mess this up by erasing some of the sketches we created. Just trying to clean up. Try to be light as possible, because once the eraser touch the ink, you're going to know right away if it's still wet. So try in a little, just small piece, and understanding that I started here. So I know that this is going to be drier than the rest of everything here in the bottom. So I'm going to start erasing and cleaning up everything here on top first, because I know we did that first. So I'm just being light. Oops. But they dry so fast, the Pit Artist. That's why I love using it in my journals and my planners. Is any one of you guys who are doing bullet journals? I love it. Cleaning the textures inside, because looking at it, I did make a lot of adjustments inside my tree, the wood grain. Okay, for this one, notice how I'm just going to dab it first and see if it's going to smear, and it didn't. So I can be light and just clean up as much as I can. We forgot to add the lines inside my mushroom, and so I'm going to try and do that. And I'm going to use this super fine tip in this one. Super fine is the one with the S, like that. Like that. Repeat that one over here. Okay. Same thing applies when I'm coloring. I always want to start on top. And I'm going to go here. And I'm going to use the leaf green 112. but I think it is important to swatch your markers. This is something that I really advise everyone. If you're gonna, you know that you have a favorite paper that you used a lot, you have a new sketchbook, I suggest that you swatch some of your favorite art supplies, whether it's marker, colored pencils, acrylic, and all that, so you can really see and tell the true colors of these markers. I suggest having one that is just a pure pigment in there without blending it with water, and one that is blended with water. And I know personally, I use the Albrecht Durer with water. So these swatches are blended with water. So I have the leaf green and the May green. So I want to use the leaf green for the tree. So I can see the swatches in here. So leaf green 112. And this is going to be dry on dry because I'm just going to apply the colors directly.
Hi, Lhey.
And yes, ma'am.
Okay, I just wanted to give you a heads up. We've only got a few minutes left. You're welcome to go over. I just don't know if other, if our attendees have plans afterwards. So just so everyone knows, the recording will be available and emailed to you tomorrow. So if you aren't able to stay with us while Lhey finishes, you'll get that in the email tomorrow, the link for the rest.
There we go. Yeah. Okay. I think you will love it. And I would love it if you guys would stay with us and finish this whole piece of illustration, because this is where the magic. And I know I could have just done it and, drawn the whole thing, but I really love sharing my progress, my process with you guys, and showing the real, what happens when you're trying to pre-plan everything in your head, because things can go differently. And I'm going to use my round brush this time, and I'm just dipping it in the water, and we're going to start blending here. And I'm also going to use my artist palette, and I'm going to use the sample brush that we have in here. This one is much bigger, so it will hold more water, and it will not make me keep dipping for water. So I'm just going to use this one. So if you have a smaller paper, if you're using a much smaller one, then you want to avoid using a big brush because it will hold some water in here. But it's very good to cover a lot of much larger space at one time.
And Lhey, the Pitt pens draw permanent or dry permanent, correct? So you could just sort of,
ma'am.
You don't have to worry about going over them with your brush.
Absolutely.
That's great. Yep. Yeah.
So they're permanent once they're dry, and they're also archival, which is the same with the Albrecht Durer. So these will remain, the colors will remain so vibrant for many, many years. So your future generation will be able to admire and look at your sketchbook and say, look at what grandma used to make. That's my goal. For my grandchildren someday to still see my drawings. Maybe you can create, a storybook too, and create their own simple stories. I think that would be wonderful. So here we already created like simple texture by the markings of those markers. And we're going to come back to that. I'm going to use my palette in here. I'm going to use the leaf green as well. Same color. And I want to pick up some of the colors. Like that. So I'm just adding more colors. right. Clean up my brush. Now I'm going to mix two colors for the sky in the back, but I really want to start with the much lighter one. This is the purple violet and the indanthrene blue 247. But I want to start with the purple first. And I'm going to use a water brush, I should say, to pick up the color. But we're going to do a wet on wet technique first. I want to wet this whole area right here where the sky is going to be. So I'm just applying water, and I'm going to try and avoid that lantern over there. Just going to go here. And then I'm going to pick up the colors. I'm going to go drop it in there and let that follow along. It will follow the movement of the water. And this is, I think this is my favorite technique when the watercolor is the wet on wet. I just love watching the colors move along with the water. There's just something about it. It's so magical. I'm just going to try my hardest to be careful going around that lamp. Remember, everything around here is going to be lighter. So I'm concentrating here on the outer side. I'm going to try and even take out some of the colors in here later because we're going to add some yellow in there. So you have a paper towel. The way you would remove some of the colors and erase is that dip your brush in water and then apply it there. And you're basically pulling all those pigments, and then use the paper towel to dab your brush. Just pick up some of those. So if you feel like you accidentally put too much pigments in there, that's what you want to do. All right. Then I'm going to apply more of the markers in here. Repeat the same process in here. Just apply water. Try my hardest to avoid my bug, my lightning bug. So cute. The only hard part with the wet on wet is because you cannot see sometimes. So you just be really mindful where it's going. We're going to pick up some of the colors in here. The reason why I love using the markers and use it for watercoloring is sometimes I have heavy hands. It's not sometimes. I really have heavy hands. So when I'm using watercolor pan, sometimes I over pick up too much color, and it's just makes me slightly frustrated when it comes to that. So that's why here I know how much color I'm really picking up, you know, so I feel like I have better control when I'm doing this technique here. So I'm just going to clean everything up. Watercolors are just so soft as well. And this is just, look how vibrant the colors are. And this is just a wash. You know, we're going to add more colors in here later. We can add just straight on by the colored pencils. And of course the colors are going to, when it dries, the saturation or the vibrancy of the colors will fade a little bit, but it's still going to be really, really bright in there. Now, when you're creating a storybook, and a lot of it is green, for example, this is an enchanted forest. So we'll be using a lot of greens in here. So having different values of greens are so important. And the reason why I love this is that you can deepen some of the green, like, for example, like what I said. And of course, if you want to use some browns, be careful because you don't want to have like muddy colors. But little goes a long way, and you can also try and just play around with it. So I'm just adding that leaf green with a little bit of that dark sepia just a little bit because one don't want mud. Of course, brown is already the color of the mud, but so here, I'm just adding. Thank you guys so much for attending the class. I knew it was going to be pushing the an hour and 30 because I know I really wanted to teach you guys everything from the basic until the very end. So for some of you that won't be able to finish along with us, we want to thank everyone for attending, but I want to finish this class and really show you how you can build the texture and the shadows and highlights by adding colors to your illustration. I think you're adding magic in here. I think this is the best part. Like that. Now that's what's gonna be a bummer when you're doing a wet on wet technique, because the water is going to, the pigments are going to follow along where the water movement is. So you're going to get some bleed through of that purple right there. I don't really mind. I mean, but if you don't like that, then be mindful of that. You might want to go in other areas of your drawings first. I think that's the beauty of watercolors. It's so forgiving, and but it can also be a little frustrating at times. But it is so forgiving though, because even little bleeds like that are, I think it adds charm to this illustration right here. And also the reason why I'm not doing a wet on wet technique for this one is because just having different amount of water used in this coloring gives that different values of green. Notice how really light the green is here and how deep the colors are going to be here. And that's by using the same color. Remember here we added a little bit of that brown. Here I just used the leaf green, but by adding more water, you're going to change the opacity or the saturation of the colors, the vibrancy of that. If you use the pure pigment, you get more vibrant colors. More water, then less saturation your colors are going to be. But I think that alone just gives you layers of different values if you have very minimal colors on hand. Just going to go back in here and just add some darker values as well, especially here behind our bunny. But this is where the colored pencils are going to be really helpful, because it's going to be easy to add different values of colors of the same ones. For example, the green, we're going to add just more layer of green here by using the colored pencils later. All right. And then I'm going to proceed for this one. I'm going to use a different green. So I'm going to use the May green in here. For this one, I'm going to do a wet on wet technique. So I'm going to use the bigger round brush that we have from Princeton, and I'm going to go work in sections. All right, so I'm going to go come here. Yeah, we're going to do on the right side first.
Nice.
Like that. Picking up those colors, add more water in my brush. I think with watercolor, the more you use it, the more you practice with it, you really get the hang of it. You know, all there is to really, I think, get used to when working with watercolors is that the amount of water, how much water, you know, you're going to use, or using too much. But with everything, it doesn't have to be watercolors, whatever it is, medium. The more you do it, the more you really learn how to play around with your supplies. And I think that's the most important part, is just actually using it. Because not a lot of us, I am guilty of, I want more colors, more brands, more type of medium. And then I sit in my office, my crafts supplies, my craft room. And so I suggest to really play around, use your supplies, experiment with it. Here we go, picking up some of that. Not enough. If when you're doing the wet on wet, and if you don't see your color moving, it means that you don't have enough water in there. And then you're not picking up enough of the pigments. So you want to do equally of both. You want to have enough water on your paper, and you also want to have enough water in your brush to pick up the pigments.
Hey, Lhey, it's Jessica here at Plaza. I
Yes,
was
ma'am.
wondering if you could zoom out a bit every once in a while, just so we can see the full
Absolutely.
perspective.
Yes, for
Oh,
sure.
thank you.
We're going to do that right now. I'm going to do it slowly. There. Here we go. I'm going to try not to go too close to my frog, because our frog's going to be green too. So it has to be a different value of green there later. So if you notice some of the greens are much lighter than the others, that means I'm just using more water in those areas. And then I'll pick up more of the pigments, especially here where the tree, the root is, the base. I'm going to just add more pigments in there. And here you're already adding shadows and highlights, by just using different values of the color. Again, it's going to fade. And so if you feel like, oh, wow, that is so bright for me, I feel like I used too much, give it a little bit of time to dry. And then after that, if it's still too light for you, then you can adjust and add more colors in there. But right now, I just want everything, my first layer, to be flushed and all that. But I'm not super ecstatic about the staining of the markers to this paper. I never usually have that problem with Albrecht Durer. But I'm just going to apply more of the color. I'm going to try not to have too much water because I want more pure colors in here. I'm just going to add it. And notice how the way I apply the colors, I'm really not overly careful. I'm just kind of like doing a swirling motion in here, because this is adding texture to this drawing. Just like that. And I'll add a little bit more, and then I'm going to leave that for a little bit. Just let it dry. I'm going to go over here at the base where some of the purple bled through with the green. And again, that's what you're going to get with watercolors. Some inconsistency, but I honestly, I love it. I am not going to complain. Now for my tree, I'm going to use the dark sepia, I pronounce that correctly. So I'm going to apply like really flush brown. So I'm going to use more water in here. I'm just going to apply it. I'm going to try not to use too much water because I already see this part right here. Have it in the purple. So I'm going to try to calm myself down. I'm trying to make it super fast so I can finish up, but I'm going to breathe and just enjoy this. As I go in the bottom, I'll have deeper colors. And because this is still wet, part of the brown is bleeding with the green. So try to be careful and not rush like me. So if you have to dry in between, it would be much preferable, or being more mindful of where you're going to apply your next color will really help a lot, because this paper is really special and it really holds that water very well. So as you can see, there's going to be bleed through like this. The water is really spreading out and moving. But I'm okay with that. That can be part of our deep part of the green.
Are there tricks for when you have color bleed?
To me, I would apply water in here later and more green, but I'm going to wait for it to dry, because if we do that right away, what's going to happen is those greens going to start bleeding through the brown as well. So we want to do it later and finish up in this section first. So really, it's all about sectioning your areas, and maybe try to play around with the amount of water, because I'm using a bigger brush right here. It really holds a lot of water. So I see that now. And the water and the paper is really amazing. That holds a lot of that moisture. It locks that moisture in like that. So just allow that to dry. And then if you don't want the brown, and if you don't want to add more green, we can just clean it up later with some water, because the watercolors will always react with water. So we can still erase that later with water. And that's one thing that's differentiate the gouache from watercolors. With the gouache, acrylic gouache, once you apply them, they're not going to move anywhere. Also the gelatos, once they're dry, they're permanent. So, and I think that's what makes watercolor so versatile and so much easier too. And you can hold it and see if I feel like there's really more moisture in there. So I don't want to do anything in there. I'm going to start with my bunny. I'm going to start coloring that. I'm going to use a smaller brush this time, just so I won't have that problem. I'm going to use the beige red from my bunny. I don't want to make it, actually I want to make my bunny white, but I can see I want to show you guys that there's like green in my bunny. So to clean that up, I'm just going to pick up some water in my brush, and I'm going to go wet this part right here. And then I'm just dabbing it off. You can also go directly with your paper towel. Just kind of like dab it. Do that. Some parts of its body has some green as well. So I'm going to clean that up too, as much as I can. I think that's really difficult when you're having smaller illustration, is because you're going to encounter this issue right here. And so you hope that that pigment is not staining too much.
Lhey, what you're working on is below the
Definitely not in
the
frame.
There you go. Thank you so much.
There we go. So a part of the body, it has that green. And so it's kind of like, all right, we just need to adjust that and use a different color. So I have the beige red. I'm going to use the ultramarine blue. I want my bunny to be white. but I don't want to leave it just like this. I don't want to leave it white. So I'm going to use a blue, and this is going to give us a visual of this bunny is white. What we're going to do is we're going to create a border around the bunny. And what it does, it just sends it, our brain tells us that, hey, this part right here, this is white, by adding that blue on the sides. Now I'm going to use very little water in here because I don't want it to bleed around too much. So I'm just going to pick up some of that blue. I'm going to show it here to show you how little this blue is. Very little. So I'm going to start with just around the border. Just like that. And then I'm going to clean my brush and just water. And I'm going to clean up, soften those harsh lines. Don't want any of those. All right, we're going to go do the same. And we're going to do this just on the body part of our bunny, because our dress is going to be a different color. I just need a little bit more in there. Very little goes a long way. Clean my brush, and I'm just going to soften everything. Go back in. If there's too much water, just dab it in the paper towel. Just having a paper towel right next to you is super, super handy. There. And this technique right here, we're doing a wet on dry, because this part of the bunny is dry and it's just our brush that is wet. So again, after I applied that lines, I'm going over with the clean brush again and just soften everything. Notice how here it's a little too blue because I didn't soften it quick enough. And so a part of that stained. That. Back in. Bunny. And since I have that little green tiny part, but it's okay because it looks like we have that shadow casting our bunny somewhere. And I'm going to use the beige red to just put it inside her nose, right that. And I'm going to color in her dress the same color. Soften it apart. All right. And then we're going to use the indanthrine blue. I'm going to color part of the rock, part of the sky. So over here, where the trees are meeting the sky, I'm going to apply that darker indanthrine blue, cleaning up that part. So we're adding more of that. feel like you have too much water, you can use your paper towel and just kind of dab on the side like this. Over here as well. So we're creating some darker side here. I'm going to use a paper towel again and just dab the water. Just like that. I think I've taken out too much. So add more. Clean my brush. I heard someone, another artist, and said, have two brushes of the same size. Have one clean brush and have one brush that you're using. I tried that. I think I have still to get used to that. It didn't work for me. All right, so this time I'm going to use the cadmium yellow 107, and I'm just going to start coloring this part right here. But I think it just makes sense. I mean, it makes sense to have the same size of brush and just one clean bowl, and but I think switching from one brush to another, I feel like it's more work for me than what I would like. I don't know if some of you are already doing that, but I mean, it really does make sense. I just have to get used to that. And here there's some bleed through of that yellow, and that's okay. That's what we actually want. So I just don't want harsh lines. So this one is just a wet brush. I'm just spreading that yellow around it because we want to create this glow. This part right here. But you want very soft lines like that. So we'll repeat that same to my lighting bug. Just color it in. Repeat that. I'm going to use the artist palette. Just put that in so that when I know I need more color, I can just pick up those colors. And for the wings, we're actually going to do that same what we did with the bunny. So we're just going to use a little bit of the blue. Going to go around it. And then with a clean brush again, we're just going to spread the colors. Try this one, you might get a bleed through of the yellow. And honestly, I'm not so mad about that. I'm okay. Because the illumination from the lightning bug will give you that. So I'm going to pick up some of that cadmium yellow also, but really wet brush. So I want to create that illumination. So I'm going to go around here. Soft one. So what we want to show, this part right here is glowing. There. The key here is to not have any sharp lines. You want it to be as smooth as possible. So you want to really blend the outer part. If you are creating along with us today, we would love to see your drawings. There. I feel like I overstretched it here, so I'm just going to clean it and bring it all the way down. That's how you're going to erase some part of that. It's just by adding water and then just really blending it. Not too much water though, because the more you're going to spread it. So just a little bit to erase part of it and blend it without having any sharp lines. Now we're almost done. I'm going to use the same beige red over here, and I'm going to color in the base of our mushroom. And we're going to do a wet on dry because this is a dry part of the mushroom. I'm going to try and be careful with this one because I know we're going to apply some red, and those red might bleed through. So I don't want to use too much water. Right? Just really flushed color because we can add more color later. Just like that. And that indanthrene blue, we can use a gray, but if you really add a lot of water in here with that, it's almost, look at me, I'm just doing dot, 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 and I'm cleaning my brush, and I'm just gonna blend everything and clean it up. Too much of the pigment, pick it up, clean it in the paper towel, just like that. Because I want my little froggy to really pop. And I'm going to use the leaf green. This is where having very minimal amount of colors used really does help to create that whole scene and pull everything together. I remember before I would use too much. I didn't realize why everything wasn't looking exactly how I want it to be. And I realized I was using too much colors. And that's nothing wrong with that. But to me, I think when I've learned how to use minimal, amount of colors, but just having different values, some are lighter than, but using the same color around my illustration really did help to pull things all together. So I'm just going to pick it up, clean that up and all that. Now we're going to use red. And I'm going to use the pale geranium lake for the mushroom. Just going to do it here. Remember that this base right here might still be a little wet, so be careful so you don't bleed the red in there. So I'm just going to try and really be careful here. If you have any white markers like acrylic markers, those are great addition for highlights. The gelatos are amazing too. I love the coconut. That's the white one that I use a lot. There. Oops. And you're going to know when you're using too much water because you're going to see a puddle of pool water in there. And then if you see that, just really pick those up and dab it in your paper towel. I'll do the same thing here. All right, now I want this to be really dark where my owl is. And we don't want to leave our owl in there with no color. And I'm going to use part of the indanthrene blue to color our owl in. Too much water. That. Just like that. I'm going to use a little bit of that purple. The blue and that purple will blend a little bit and it will create that beautiful gradient too, like that. I'm going to use a brown directly and I'm going to color this part right in here. The Albrecht Durer markers comes in 2 tips. The other one is a bullet tip and the other is a brush tip. Now, if you have much smaller areas that you need to color directly with your marker and you want a precision control, you might want to use the bullet tip on that end. So you have a bullet and then you have a brush. I love the brush because it really does cover a much larger space at a time. But just because I've gotten so used to it as well. So here I'm just going back and fill in some areas where I feel like I didn't blend enough. So I can come back directly using the marker itself and just fill in those areas right there. Just like that. This area right here, we're also the bleed through from the purple. If that bothers you, then you can just cover it with part of the green. Just like that. Just going to keep this bottom area right here really dark also. You can come back with your brush and just really clean up those harsh lines like that. Area right here too, like that. Now I'm going to go zoom out real quick so we can see the whole picture. I like what I said, the colors are going to be much lesser. The vibrancy is much different now that it's drying. Look at this red right here. It's much less saturation in there. And I'm going to grab my heat tool. This is my favorite heat tool because I want to apply, and I can touch the paper. It's really still moist. I can feel that. One key to not warp is that dry it on both sides. So if you're drying it, you're going to notice that the sides will warp. And if you're anything like me, that I like to move around my paper, having the painter's tape is not always so useful because I feel like I'm having a hard time to move around my arm if I need to reach some area. So, I mean, it just depends on how much water I'm using. If my project really calls for a lot of water, then the painter's tape are really a must. But with this one, I knew I wasn't going to use a lot of waters. And so I didn't bother using any painter's tape like that. So now to bring in and add in more details, this is where the colored pencils are really, really handy. And you want to go, every time I would try to blend, do any types of blending, it doesn't matter whatever medium it is, but mostly with markers, colored pencils, and alcohol markers, I'd like to use the same color, but 3 different values. For example, for the red, I want to have a lighter red. So we have the permanent carmine would be my lightest. I'll have the alizarin crimson for my medium. And then I'll have the dark red for the dark. I want to go in and just really add more colors and more texture. I'm going to move in my water so we don't have any accidents in here. And I'm just going to go color in. When you're doing any type of coloring with the colored pencils, you want to go in section and you want to do short strokes because all these short strokes is you're building textures in here. Now, there are many different types of adding textures. You might want to do a texture that's really messy. And I've seen it and I've done it as well, where my strokes are so inconsistent. Some are verticals, some are horizontals, but I think that's what add those whimsical charm to the drawing when it's not perfect. And I like both. I really do. And so sometimes you'll see in one drawing, in one story, many different techniques are applied, right? So not just the clean one, some parts of it will be all messy. Some of the strokes will be messy, some are vertical, some are horizontal, some are zigzaggy, and that's part of that adding texture to it. So I'm just going to clean up here some areas, and so I'm adding the dark. This is the medium right now. And so here, notice me, I'm going different direction now. Earlier it was here, and now I'm going across it and just adding this. And I am applying light to medium pressure while I'm doing this. Light to medium. And still short strokes. Now I'm going to use the dark red, and this is where it's going to pop out. And I'm going to go around my white areas with a dark. And adding the shadow or darker value here will make those white pop even more, which is pretty awesome. And I'm going to use cinnamon color and just add textures here. But I know I've taken up so much of your time, and we really appreciate you joining us today. If you have any questions for me while I'm finishing up here, I know that we've went over and beyond with our time, but I hope that showing you everything was helpful too. And with the brown, I'll do the same thing. I'll have 3 different values and shades of the brown. And I'm going to go with the burnt sienna. And this I'm going to do light pressure and short strokes. And I know that I want the darker area here. So I'm applying a little bit more pressure here. And I'm going to go ease up on the pressure as I go up. So pressure, pressure, pressure. And I'll go ease up here and just go really light pressure here. And so this is how you can create some depth as well if you don't have a lot of colors. If you have fewer colors that you need, if you don't have that lightest and medium, but just by applying various pressure in your illustration, that will give you depth and highlights by using the same color. By adding more layers of colors, you're adding more depth to that, and you're using just the same. So I'm going to do the same thing. Now I'm doing a much longer, but very light pressure. Very light, very, very light. It is my pleasure, guys. I mean, I really love teaching everything that I have learned through the years, because I know it can get overwhelming, especially when you're running out of ideas. I think ideas are the hardest part, and so when I'm coming up with classes to teach, it's like I'm not just teaching, but I'm learning so much, because I want to come up with classes that everyone can enjoy, and also that everyone can really learn from. Because when I'm teaching them, I'm learning. I have to learn it first myself so that I can explain it in a way where everyone can really relate to it, and not just a lot of artistic technical terms. I mean, those are amazing, but sometimes the real application is what I want to hear. And also seeing the process and a lot of that mistakes at the same time while the teacher is teaching. And I like to see that. I like to see a whole lot of that process. Now for the darker, I think I'm going to get a darker shade. Maybe the Van Dyke brown is dark enough, but I just want to go in here in some areas and add some darker like that. And so for this one, go around the lines, and you can go around the lines and just add that. So basically, you're just retracing all these lines that we created earlier, but now just going over with some colored pencils. But I mean, you get the whole idea because I showed everything from the simple process to the more complicated of applying and creating textures and colors in here. But you get the whole idea is that here in the grass, we'll be doing the same thing. And you're going to notice, I mean, watercolor is amazing if you have that first base of color. And then you add the textures from the pencils. I think you're going to fall in love with this type of coloring and drawing because it's so simple. I mean, it's so basic. We just use very basic shapes. We put them together and we created some characters. We created a beautiful image, a magical image, as a matter of fact. And so I'm going to go over the blue one and I'm just going to clean up parts of my bunny. I'm going to go around it. And you know what's cute is when you have a character like this, do not forget the blush. The blush will change everything. So we need to add some blush. And notice how my pink is the smallest. This is a pink Matter Lake. It's my favorite. So I'm just going to add some oval shape to this. I'm going to add some cute blush. And look how charming that is. And I'll do that to my bug as well. It just changed that whole character. Just like that. I'm going to use this blue, same blue, just go over my candle to make it look like it was white. I'm going to create a gray. And so this is a warm gray 5. I want a cool tone. So I'm going to switch to the cold gray 3. And we're going to go here and just add some texture to our rock. Remember that it's all about the strokes as well when you're adding those colored pencils, because you can go as smooth application with colored pencils because some don't like those textures. I personally really, really do. And that is why I love my Polychromos pencils. Because you can layer and layer and layer on top of it. And it's amazing how much it blends. It just blends so beautifully. And it also retains the tip, the sharpness of your tip. So it does, that alone really helps me a lot because I don't have to sharpen. Because that takes a lot of time, especially when you're using a lot of colors and you have to sharpen every time, you know. Oh my gosh, we're actually almost done. I'm going to do the same thing. This is where my problem here, area right here. So I'm going to use the grass green. Hold on. I think I'm going to use a deeper green than that. So we have a permanent green in here. I'm just going to go over this area right here with some green. I'm just following along the shape of the tree like that. And also, if there's any questions that I was not able to answer, I hope you guys follow us along on social media. I would love to stay in touch with you guys. You can always reach out to me through DM, send me a quick, hi. And if you have any questions that I was not able to answer here, or while watching the replay and you still have some questions, I'm like, please feel free to message me. I would be more than happy to find an answer. If I don't know it, we'll find some answers to that. I'm trying to find a lighter green. No, that's too much of a yellow green. This is the dark permanent green olive. So I'm going over this one. Just smooth in this part right here. Just add that. Now we can add some textures to the grass by applying some short strokes, but I want to take care of my little froggy first. I'm going to create some shape in the middle and make this darker like that. adding some small dots inside of this body. Just like that. And then we're going to use the pink matter and add some blush as well, because hello, it's just so much cuter. Like that. And then I want to add some textures over here. So just going to go over that part. Oh, thank you so much, Diane. I know you will love it. And if you have any questions with the markers, please. And also, everyone here in Plaza Art is just so amazing. They're just so inspiring. I need to do some shopping too. I need to do some shopping as well.
I haven't gotten to the colored pencils yet, but this is my so far.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm gonna make you guys all, we're gonna do a gallery view in a second. And I'm gonna make you show everybody so we can all see everything. I'm so excited. Oh my God.
Yeah, and tomorrow I'll look at the pencils because I haven't gotten that far, and
I love
look at
it.
your video.
Love, love, love that.
Great. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you. Thank you. So
all right, Lhey, is it okay to do the gallery view now, or?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So if for those that aren't familiar, in the upper right-hand corner of your Zoom screen, there should be a view button. And if you change that from speaker to gallery, turn your cameras on and then show your work, that would be awesome.
Okay. Oh.
If you promise not to laugh, this is my first one.
No.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Amazing. Diane, what is?
Oh my gosh.
Oh, I like
those are amazing. Oh, wow.
Hey,
Clap here.
It's not
Great.
working.
It's not working for us.
That's so amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Wow.
Do you want to say anything before we get going?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
It's wonderful.
Thanks so
Wonderful.
much.
It was fun.
Thank you so much, everybody.
All right, thank you. Somebody just asked if we get a colors of violet. I apologize. But that'll be in the email out tomorrow.
Perfect.
All right. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you
all so much. Have a great day.
Have a great one. Today was awesome. Okay. Bye-bye.